Every 3 minutes, a person in the U.S. is diagnosed with a blood cancer like leukemia, lymphoma, or myeloma, blood cancers that often require patients to endure difficult treatments that leave them feeling weak, cold, and isolated. Subaru of Gwinnett is here to help. Since 2016, Subaru has partnered with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, a cause the fan has been proud to support for over 24 years. And in the month of June, through our Subaru Loves to Care initiative, we're continuing our partnership with LLS to give even more to patients and their families. Subaru, more than a car company. Visit SubaruofGwinnett.com to learn more.
When your guest's last name is Player, the last thing you think you'll be asking is how many types of fonts can you name? This is exactly what happened on this episode featuring Brett Player of Play Agency, and it turned out to be one of our best episodes to date. You can't have a conversation about brand without having one about design. From logos to websites to sales and collateral materials to, yes, fonts, your design language is telling your customers and employees more than you know. If your business needs a design or overhaul, or you're just a nerd for fonts, this is your episode. All that on today's episode of The Marketing Madmen.
They say marketing is a madman's game. So now we turn it over to the Marketing Madman with Nick Constantino and Trip Job.
Happy Saturday. Welcome to the Marketing Madmen. Trip Job and Nick Constantino here live from the Battery, and feeling kind of creative today. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So whenever we do these kind of shows, you never know which direction we are, but I'm happy we have focus and direction on this one because it is one of the more fascinating. I think just design as a whole and just how this fits in is something that personally I haven't covered. I know you did a previous episode about it, but I'm excited about it. So let's hit it. Hit it.
I mean, and I go back, early in my career, all my days leading marketing at Nina, and design was such a critical part of so much of what we did. And then even at Oldcastle, design in a different space, more in the architectural and design space. It's still the underpinnings around product and brand messaging. It's a lot of people don't understand it, and I'm excited that today we've got an expert with us and be able to really dive into to what design's about.
Yeah, so let's introduce, we got Brett Player here, which is an awesome name, by the way. Either you should be in Vegas, you should be living in Vegas, just making deals over there, and then the agency is Play Agency, which is also a great name. So, Brett, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So let's establish this first. So your agency, you've been around for 20 years, going on around 20 years, correct?
A little, yes, for the most part. A little hiatus for a while in the middle, but yes.
Semantics. So 20 years.
Semantics.
So 20 years. So talk about your experience. Talk about how you started the agency. Talk a little bit about the skill set, what you do, what you teach, because that'll set us up for a really good conversation and give you your qualifications to speak on behalf of design.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thanks. So Play was started in 2003. So I was up in New York, and I was invited to come down. I was working up there for close to 5 years in design and the agency side of stuff. And they asked me to come down to help start this agency, and it was in VTA. Do you guys know VTA? It's an old name. It used to be Vision Touch Amplify, but that's kind of the thing. But anyway, they wanted an inside agency, and they were more of a production kind of video thing. And so I came down there. I started it with a couple of other folks, and then we were basically an advertising agency. But I'm a brand guy, right? So I was a design director at the time, and there was a creative director that was well known in Atlanta, and he ended up taking over Fitzco and as their creative director, their main chief creative officer. And so then I was promoted, which was awesome, and I started running it within a year. And we shifted a little bit over to design.
Sure.
And so in New York, I was able to do work over at Landor in branding, and then packaging, which is de Gripko Bay, which was a boutique agency that was out of Paris, Marc Gobet. Yep. So all funny stories about all of that. And then the internet came around for a larger kind of population. And the reason that was, which is kind of interesting, can you guys guess why the internet jumped from, a bunch of engineers over to a bunch of brands?
Well, I thought
anytime I hear the internet, I think porn is just whatever. It's the first thing that comes to mind. I don't know why.
Once the internet, anyone can design anything.
I just think porn is the reason for everything. But no, tell us.
We don't need design anymore. We can just find it on the internet.
Back then, I don't know. I don't even know. No. So porn on the internet back then, I'm sure was not readily available.
That's why any technology transitions. By the way, that's why VHS beat Betamax. It's all because of just so everybody knows.
We warned you.
We just took a hard left here. But anyway, I'm going to get back on track.
Please.
So it was 100K. So, you talk about that type of stuff. So it could actually hold not video, but image. And so then it was a race for everyone to go out to these big agencies that are within digital to work there. And so most of us did not have digital skill set necessarily, but we jumped in. And
ironically, in 2000. It was 2003 or 4-ish. I was working in San Diego at a company called Divx, which was responsible for the transcoding that allowed you to start playing video over the internet. So they were the ones that found out the codec. They bought this codec so you can transfer enough data to make video on the internet. So hugely popular. I mean, it's fallen to nothing now, but I was involved when I was young in my career of that advent of as people just started switching over. And ironically, the reason the codec caught was because of pornography, because that was the codec that the porn industry took, and that's where all of this came from. I mean, if you think about how much of the internet. So I just wanted to add some credibility to my story. Trip.
I'm gonna go back. to more where Brett was going at that time frame. Nina, we actually made one of the first moves of swatch books, color swatch books, onto the web, right? On the internet, and that was a big for designers to be able to start out, and every designer has the old Pantone book, right? But to be able to start going, okay, instead of having it physically, and we still wanted them, people to have that physical hand and touch of a swatch book, but to be able to go out on the website and to be able to look at colors and start to bring colors into the work you're doing on the web, was that same time frame.
It's crazy you mentioned that, because everything was 32 colors.
Yeah.
Everything. So you had to fit everything within 32 colors. And the only big organization that got past that a little bit was the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and they had a color, and everybody in New York was going crazy just because of this particular color on their website. But anyway, I digress. But that's very interesting because that was another kind of stumbling block that we had to get over. So anyway, I designed for Procter & Gamble, Cadillac.com, all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So then I came down here and started using those different skill sets to run play. So I wanted to get back into branding and packaging and stuff like that. Even though we were doing advertising, we were doing a lot of video. So we ended up getting some pretty good clients. Spanx, CNN, Home Depot, Clemson University with Dell, stuff like that. So it was a lot of fun and a lot of different types of design. And we were kind of design first, but because of that creative director and allowing me to really understand advertising and how to create it, that was the biggest thing. We were able to do that as well.
And so then the skills transfer, right? Because for me, so I think packaging really changed for me personally with the advent of the iPhone. Because Steve Jobs was the first visionary that realized that when you open a package, how much of a part of that experience it is. And nowadays, you can order something for $12 from China, and it is coming in the most neatly packaged. So I think that design language also transferred itself over to marketing, right? And for me, it's about concise angles. You don't need fluff. Everything's kind of packaged together to be its own little thing. And I think that's where it actually fits really well with advertising, right? And I think you can design. And for audio also, I think the way a commercial is designed and laid out is not that different than the way graphics are or video are. So I think fundamentally those things align. Talk a little about that. Talk about how you approach advertising from a brand side and how the packaging and how all these things come together, because I think it's kind of a lost art nowadays. We don't think about that when we're making campaigns. We think of strategy or broader things, or we go really granular and think about like last click attribution. But talk about that design language and how that kind of goes through all the way through a campaign.
So we talked a lot about that when I was at DeGripko Bay, and it was called efficacious design, right?
Efficacious. That's the first time I've heard that one.
Right? So
efficacious design.
Efficacious design, which is, if you look it up, which I had to, of course.
Yeah.
But, it really means this idea of what you're talking about. You can almost, functionally kind of see where you're going.
Yeah.
And design can never get in the way. Design does not get in the way of functionality, right? So that's going to be very important. And we always said that, too. If you can see the design before you can see the product, then you've kind of failed, right? But there is something really important. It's called the emotional aspect of the entire thing, right? So I did this thing up at Rutgers around user experience.
Dirty Jers, baby. Dirty Jers.
You like? Yeah, okay. All right. And so I went up there and for this mini masters in UX, which is really cool, by the way, because I didn't really know what UX was, even though I was doing it every day.
Yeah.
So it did kind of help define it. And that happens all the time, right? They're just like, some word comes into the industry and you're like, I don't even know what this is, And
now it's probably the single most important thing on the internet these days is that user experience. And and I'll tell you right now, Paramount Plus, they suck at it. Because every time I try to load a show, the freaking thing just spins, and that is user experience. I will not, I'm so frustrated. I can't tell you how many times how frustrating it is to watch a company as big as Paramount, who's pretending to be this huge company, can't figure out how to get a video to play, and that's part of that user experience.
It's
it is
super frustrating.
so
You're
important.
absolutely correct, and it comes down to user interface, human experience. So I'm looking at that doorknob there. That's user experience. Why is it where it is, right? And why do you not come up with a different doorknob, every week? Because you wouldn't know how to open a damn door.
Yeah. Can I tell you a cool user
speaking of the Tesla, I still, every time I'm like trying to figure out how to open those stupid doors.
Can I tell you something user
It's the same
experience
thing.
about this room? So if you look at the room, there's no right angles. Right angles kill sound. So this room was designed with audio in mind. So the experience, there's no right angles. There's actually a merge point where the whole room has to equalize itself out with the merge point because there's no right angles in here because right angles dead in sound. User experience, that actually affects the broadcast, which is why we've had many times people say this is the cleanest audio broadcast that they listen to because of the way this room is designed. So to give you an example of user experience and design.
There you go. There you go. But so emotionally, someone is 13 times more likely to look at something and act if it's got emotion to it, right? So you do want to design with emotion.
Now, you're tricky, though, because that's hard to fake.
But that's when you get into packaging. So packaging design, which you hit. And so we're starting to go down that path. And you mentioned with the iPhone. So the iPhone was part of it. But then if you think of it, and again, we did a lot of luxury goods packaging, bags, boxes, things like that. You think of Tiffany's, all right? It's the Tiffany color bag. It's the Tiffany box, all right? And do you sweat over how much whatever item you're putting in the box is? No, but you get a box that you think is worth a lot, and it's a $3 box versus a 10-cent
and
box.
The emotion is.
But the reality is that emotion creates that view of, man, I'm taking this home. The box. As soon as she sees the color, she knows it doesn't matter.
And the bag was because how important it is for everybody else when you walk out of the store to see you with the bag. So that those are all envy, glut, jealousy. These are all emotions that come into it. Yeah, I agree.
It's true, and it's got to do with brand is much more than just a logo. It's the color, it's the typography, and Tiffany is. Well, Tiffany and, like you said, Apple. I mean, those two were just, just unbelievable. I can remember when a lot of people make it look like an Apple box, or something like that. It's always funny when somebody breaks through and they're like, well, make it like this, and then Simon Sinek did the Y.
And then all
the
of a sudden, circle.
Right, and then
all
of a sudden Apple's back in your picture and everybody's like, well, make it like Apple, and it's kind of funny. I had a buddy that actually worked with Steve Jobs with Apple, and he said that Steve was very instrumental in that whole thing. He's like, look, I want it clean. I want to use Garamond only. And you're just like, what?
The text,
Was that, is that specific about it?
That might have been the LSD he was on at the office, but
but I mean, and you're right, and I think we were in the golden age of brand, right? And I think the last 20 years, and when we come back from the break, we'll talk a little bit about design. But one of the things that we're seeing now, let's say more in the retail space, is sustainability. And so all the, in some ways, almost excesses to create that Tiffany's package and to create some of the Louis Vuitton packaging. Now things are going a different way. So we'll hit that in a few minutes. You're listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3. We'll be right back.
Every 3 minutes, a person in the U.S. is diagnosed with a blood cancer like leukemia, lymphoma, or myeloma, blood cancers that often require patients to endure difficult treatments that leave them feeling weak, cold, and isolated. Subaru of Gwinnett is here to help. Since 2016, Subaru has partnered with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, a cause that FAN has been proud to support for over 24 years. And in the month of June, through our Subaru Loves to Care initiative, we're continuing our partnership with LLS to give even more to patients and their families. Subaru, more than a car company. Visit SubaruofGwinnett.com to learn more.
This morning in North Carolina, wheels are spinning. Determination is winning. A passion is now a thriving business, and it shows no signs of slowing down. How? The power of a conversation, like the one Clint Spiegel had with First Horizon Bank about starting a bike wheel manufacturing facility in Asheville. Now it's not just talk, it's rubber meets road. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Clint. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.
Now back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3 FM.
Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen. Trip Job and Nick Constantino here with Brett Player from Play Design. And, we're talking a lot about the brand experience, the user experience. And I do think things are changing. I mean, I'm seeing it. I'm in a different line of work today, but we're dealing with, I just got back from the Sustainable Packaging Coalition conference, and there's so much emphasis now on greenhouse gas emissions, on lowest impact of sustainability. brands aren't giving up their brand image, but they are thinking about, can we do it in ways that have less impact on the environment, where 10, 15 years ago, it was maybe more created this luxury feeling. How are you seeing that?
Well, I can talk a little bit about what was going on 10 or 15 years ago, because that was kind of interesting. Yes, we were going almost overboard with inserts and, and stuff like that, right, to kind of carry on that brand experience. Today, I really do feel as if, and I see it as well, that if you do design, within the package realm, that that's one of the first things that you want to consider as a designer, is how is this going to recycle, how much. We don't want to see a lot of it, because then it gives the wrong message of the brand itself. And it's actually pretty costly, which is the ironic thing, right? It's pretty costly to subtract rather than just...
In many cases, yeah.
It is. But, where before, and this goes, just past packaging in general, but marketing materials in general, it used to be, organizations would use recycled paper and just, print one thing, and and that used to be the way that that more nonprofits would do it, right? Because they were actually trying to pay they were trying to actually, save money. Yeah. But now it just seems like, anyone and everyone's trying to definitely look at that. So they may look at the luxe side of stuff, and then they also may look at the environmental side of stuff. And if it can blend, that's phenomenal. But a lot of it does have to do with, you're talking about paper. Right.
And they're different things. So there was a study that got thrown up about, if you look at let's call it the very inexpensive plastic bag, right, that you get at grocery store or whatever, versus a paper, bag, versus some of the cotton, and then even let's get into some of the other engineered materials.
Multi-use.
But technically, the real thin plastic probably has less of an impact unless you're using the reusable 50 to 75.
Whoa, hold on, Trev. We're starting to talk with logic here. Do you think people are doing this logically?
That's the point.
They are doing this because they believe consumers want something, which they don't even fully understand, so they have to dive full into it thinking it's going to happen. Now, ironically...
It's emotional, though. If you look at some of the data, and I question a little bit, the point is, there's pros and cons of everything, but now it becomes this story about, this is in our oceans, or this is in our landfills, which I totally get.
And the story, because you have to because if you found out how bad electric cars are for the environment, when you bring in the lithium and the raw earth materials that people are dying, they're not good for the environment, but there's a story that has to be told. So again, we don't need to go there, but what I do find fascinating is the design cycle has to have been sped up so much now, because you can't just design something and think for 20 years the packaging is going to work, because those trends change now. Almost every 2-3 years, the trends are what's important are changing. So I have to imagine one of the things, especially with your clients that you're talking about, is the design cycles have sped up so much, because you have to be reinventing all the time. I liken it to Taco Bell. I mean, how many ways can you repackage the same 6 ingredients to make a new taco? But every freaking week they have a new taco, and people go nuts. And if you've looked, I joke about it, but all the brands in the world, they're trying to come up with these limited edition items. If you look at watches, if you look at cars and collaborations, they're trying to play on this limited edition thing because they adjust their own supply demand curve. So tangent, but what I'm trying to say is that I have to imagine the design cycles have been sped up completely nowadays, and you're dealing with clients on, hey, you can't think 7-8 years down. You got to think the next 2-3 years.
Well, design cycles are interesting anyway. I mean, if you got a package, a design cycle for a package should be 1 to 3 years.
Wow.
And then the internet, you're talking about a website that should be ongoing, as depending on the functionality.
Sure.
But if it's even a brochure site, it should be really re-upped. Every 2 to 3 years, something like that.
And it's crazy because most businesses
thing that stays, that's got staying power, is your logo, or it's your logo.
But even those change. Even those change.
It should
so
have
often.
some staying power.
Well,
slight tweaks, but I mean, Buick was the most recent one. I mean, I don't understand why they did it, but they had this whole rebrand. So now it's the same thing, except it just misses the circle on the outside, and it's this huge. And
how much
money? How much money goes?
When they made it flat, you're like, and you look at that typography going across the. I mean, I'm kind of a nerd, but you look at that type going across that circle on the top, and you're like, man, is that even kerned right? It's just nuts.
It feels off.
Right.
It does. It totally feels off. But But yeah, I forgot what it
was. Well, I will say one thing. I was on the initial call when SunTrust and BB&T merged to Truist. I was on the original call, and one of the things that I found fascinating is how much money and time went into designing that logo. So for those that don't know, those are two T's coming together for trust and technology to make you feel good. And the color, because they didn't want a regular color, was invented. So they made up Truist purple, and they spent so much time and money to make Truist purple, and then realized that none of the freaking printers had the color that they were trying to use on anything.
It wasn't a PMS or anything.
So
right.
And the reason I
appreciate being at Nina.
And the reason I say this is because how much time and effort goes into this, but how much of a lack of practical application is put into it. It's so pie in the sky and 30,000 foot. So how do you apply that to your business? And when you're meeting with clients, how do you explain this process? Imagine I'm a client and I'm saying, hey, I want this design. How do you start the process? How do you get them to understand what's important? Because it is a misunderstood part of business and marketing, in my opinion, and I don't even have a clue. So how do you deal with that with your clients?
So I've argued this with people within the industry and people I've worked with, which is kind of interesting because people always say the brand doesn't belong to you, it belongs to your customers, right? I mean, that's kind of like the age old, and it's always like customer first, that kind of stuff, which, I can appreciate, but I really think that the customer first and getting all those those insights is really important to do the strategic brief or the creative brief, but I really believe that the logo itself should be, a reflection of who you are. Right? Of who your values are, that type of thing.
As much as who you are. Because some people in young have a vision of what they're going to be in 10 years. You have to design a logo that can be who you want to be. It's not always who you are right now, but I for sure.
No. And so to your point, logos should be designed so they're not so trendy, right? So they're just more like anchor in the ground type of thing, right? And you can go back. I mean, geez Louise, when Paul Rand was doing his logos or Pentagram or those kind of folks, those logos, they just, Woody Purtle, but they just last forever, and you just cannot make them any better.
Yeah, the Nike swoosh, man. You don't get much better on Earth than the Nike swoosh.
Right.
You don't get, but there's no more recognizable probably on Earth because the Apple. I mean, you could think there's other apples, but Nike swoosh is in its own thing. Is probably the most recognized logo that there is.
No one's come close to
and
it.
It's a metaphor.
It's
It's a metaphor. And then everybody's like, oh, let's just design, and we get really into this design and what the design looks and everything. But we have gotten away from the metaphor. So with designs, especially logos, we always look at metaphor, and then we always look at typography, and we always look at them broken apart, that type of thing, and whether you even need.
Yeah.
I mean, my first big logo out of the box was AMFAR, right, which is American Foundation for AIDS Research, and I tried to do a metaphor for that, and that was in the height of AIDS. Okay?
Yeah, that's a tough thing to do.
Every
the political stigma, the political stigma and that's another harder. That was hard in the '80s. Imagine nowadays, you put a logo up, you got 6,000 people that are like, that is offensive. How is a check mark offensive to these people? So, but AMFAR especially. I mean, that was the heyday of the politics. That was really an interesting time. My wife has worked in that industry now for the past 30 to 20 years, and I mean that is actually the what happened with AIDS has actually impacted so much of the way people thought about COVID. Even I mean those are still. So I agree with you. So again. That brings up a good point. How do you bring the politics into it now? Because I have to imagine the environment where we're so divisive now, it's even harder to come up with logos and designs because you're always going to piss somebody off.
I mean, honestly, man, you got to design it, and then you got to, either like hold true to it or allow some kind of
flexibility. And
before you release it, you would you
soft opening.
Out. You do a soft opening with it could be people within the company or it could be consumers, and but it is the worst when you see somebody come out. With a new logo and then have to retract it. And it's just like, it is the talk of the town. It's kind of like a new Coke, It's just like, it's crazy.
Well, are there any examples you've seen recently of that?
That you're allowed to say?
Yeah, that you're allowed to talk about?
Yeah, it's just, I'm sorry, but I cannot think of, but there is a huge one like 10 years ago that was just like crazy. They put it out and everybody went nuts about it and they just pulled it right back. Oh, okay. So it wasn't packaging, right? But it was Tropicana, which was the orange juice.
Yeah.
So you remember, and this is, you guys are in marketing and advertising. You love this, right? I mean, how could you get any better than having an orange with a straw stuck in it? I mean, that metaphor is incredible. I mean, it's just like your brain.
I told you, somebody was pissed off at oranges and just had to throw a scene. It had to be. Somebody had to just be. Maybe it was the banana farmers that were like, I don't want to give them credit, so they're like sabotage to create. I mean, it sounds crazy, but look, I think we've done a really good job going on wild tangents. Yep. But I think what's important, but tell a little bit about the thought process. Talk to the brands. Talk to because again, sometimes you're a $2 million window company and you don't think about these things. But talk about how important this is, especially for scaling. Because there's one thing to be a mom and pop shop with 6 employees. There's one thing for scalability to go up to be able to have multiple thousand employees. So think about how to think about that. Talk about how to think about this if you are a small business starting. How do you think about something as complex as what you're talking about? You're talking about really nerdy stuff, typography, right? What guy that's trying to go start a cement company is like, well, let me think of the typography. Like, talk how do you put practical words on how to apply this? Because I think there's so many listeners that are like, hey, this is all great, but I don't own a multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar company where I could have a whole team. This is me running. How do I think about this? Talk about practicality, how you tell people to think about this stuff.
Absolutely. So one thing you would need to do initially is to get your thoughts out on paper, and that is, we put it in a creative brief form, but even just to do it yourself is fine, right? So you think about, what type of feelings someone should get when they think about your company, right? You could go as a metaphor to think about, what kind of car would this be if I was driving a car? That's kind of fun, right? Are you a Jeep Wrangler or are you a BMW convertible? I mean, what are you? Or are you a sedan?
And that brings in that metaphor, right? Because now you're thinking metaphorically also, which is something we talked about earlier.
So you start to get like those kind of thoughts on paper.
And that's much harder than just writing a sentence saying what you are. Which car you requires thought and creative thinking, probably different parts of the brain.
Absolutely. I mean, there's one agency I snuck in on, and they were presenting and they're like, who's your favorite band kind of thing, right? And so then what kind of music do you like, and so that kind of helped that agency kind of figure that out. So it's the same type of thing, right? It's like, are you a rock band? Are you an 80s band? Or, what type of music, would you be? What type of music,
Dude, could I tell you something? Honestly, that is, first of all, one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard, and I've never applied it, but this applies to when I'm doing presentations, when I'm making commercials, finding out what kind of band or what kind of business this person, one, you learn rapport about the client really quickly, but two, you're making them think outside the box of the world they know. They're leaving their comfort zone, which is when the best rapport is developed, when the best things come from. So keep going. I'm just saying that applies to almost any kind of media or marketing you're doing. If you can get them to think metaphorically to begin with, that's amazing.
Right. And so, it's a lot of fun for the agency, too, because you get a lot more information, right? Yeah. And so then you would take that and then you would go to an agency or even, a designer that you respect and like, and you would see their portfolio and make sure that they're good, right?
Yeah. Right.
That would be important. And then you would want, from our point of view, what we do, it depends on what we're doing, right? If we're looking at a brand where we know that they're going to be doing a lot of stuff in the future, right? Yeah. It could be packaging, website, whatever, social, all that type of stuff. We may actually do visual boards, almost like an interior designer would do boards. We call them brandscapes, right? But we would say this is, so we don't put a ton of money into that, right? We're not designing. We're actually going out there and collecting this type of information and saying this is the avenue you want to go, and then we throw some adjectives to it.
And think about it, so a lot of now with the website and other things, people are trying very quick hitting, which we talked about. So if you're trying to get across that you're in different industries, so you may want to go down, icons. And so thinking about your own brand, but then how does the icons that portray where you're playing, the industries you're in, how does that work?
And what happens if you're a black icon on a black website? I mean, there's so much more that goes into this, like typesets and how things go over. It's not just cut and dry. I mean, I've seen, again, Truist personal, their brand thing is 200 pages of like criteria in which, and if you misplace one thing, somehow they won't answer an email from you for 6 months, but you misplace one letter and it's like the world comes to a crashing halt. So, but I think you're right. It's more than just the logo.
So, but hold on, let's get back to the logo real quick, then I'll get to that. But I'm going to go very fast on this, okay? So, design-wise, what we like to do is we like to do at least 5 to 7 different iterations of what the logo could be, right? And it's an umbrella. It's more conservative to more out there. And the idea is on the more out there kind of phase is to get the client kind of uncomfortable, right? So we want the client to be uncomfortable, and we say that going in. We're going to show you some stuff that you're not probably going to like, but you
might like some little pieces of it, or
we need to show it to you.
Sure, it's Billy Idol.
Otherwise, they just want to go conservative. If you go this way, then maybe you meet in the middle.
Right. Yeah. Or they like, you've explored it, right? And so then somewhere, and you'd be surprised how many go the crazy, you know, which I love, right? And we're responsible enough not to make it so crazy. And then it must function well. It must be readable, right? We have we have come in and redesigned so many logos for huge organizations, that the readability is bad, right?
Yeah.
And so it could be as simple as that.
You know,
Okay.
I love this. This is simple marketing, right? Your billboards. How many billboards do you pass with 600 words on it? And it's like, I can't, this is not a billboard. I can't read. So I'm just saying, what I'm trying to do is apply principles, because what it
reproduction,
sounds like is what you're talking about in just a logo are simple principles for most of marketing, which I love the comparison. I didn't even expect to go this way, but I love it.
Well, I think part of that is someone will, some of the bad ones I've seen in the past, you've probably had to recreate these, is someone loves a look, but they see it at a certain size and in a certain format. And then they don't think about how does that translate down to a business card? How does that translate down to the website? How does it and
Or
all
translate
of a sudden,
up. Because sometimes it's scaling up
right,
too,
whatever,
and it looks
but
wacky big.
It looks great on a 18 by 24 poster board, when you're in the boardroom discussing the logo, but then when you try to reproduce it in the traditional, all of a sudden it doesn't work.
Right, and you actually need to get to it so tiny, it's a favicon, which is that tiny little thing that if you pull a website up, it'll be up top, or it's your social media icon, right? So all that stuff the design firm should look at, because you're going to use it. I mean, you have to use it, right? So then you get to usability. So you do a brand guidelines, and the brand guidelines, of course, just has all the formats that you would need the logo to be in, right? So that's basically, just to break that down a little bit, there's vector-based, right? So vector-based is something that's mathematical.
Yeah, that can scale to a big sign. It's got to be a vector-based.
As big as you want, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be Illustrator files, EPS files, or now they have SFG files. SFG files are the best because nobody can mess with them, right? So they are what they are. Okay, so you can't go in and change anything.
You can just scale.
You just scale it, right? So you can send it and boom. Or you have, the RGB or the hex number or whatever, right? And that's going to be the internet type of stuff, right? And so, anyway, so those are two different. So you would have that. You'd have to have your colors. You'd have your primary colors of the logo. And then you're like, okay, but if I'm going to do a website, I'm going to do marketing materials, what other colors would work with these two colors, right?
Yeah,
And so
primaries and secondaries and all that stuff, yeah.
And then sometimes you'll have typography within the logo type itself, right? That you may make, choose typography, which I think is kind of a sin. You should definitely change that type to be unique, right? So even if it's a typeface, you could change it, right? To make it a little more unique for your company. But then I don't think you'd ever really want to use that type as one of your primary types. Because I think it takes away from your logo.
I got it.
Now
so you want to alter it so nobody can ever duplicate it. So, but you don't need to use it for everything, because then it distracts from what the logo is.
Yeah.
So,
or if I use a weird thing like, if I'm doing, let's say Fritz Quarta, which is a totally.
So can I ask you before you start, how many fonts can you name actually? Because we seem to have named a couple. I'm not so into the font game. How many can you name off the top of your head? If I had to just quiz you, you don't have to do it. But how many?
My memory is not great. But
dozens.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
How many can you name, Trip?
Probably 100.
100 fonts. How many can you name?
Not 100, but dozens.
Oh man, I got to step up my font game.
I'm looking at that one right there, that Dickey broadcast through the window, and I'm trying to think of what that font is, but I know it.
So we had to download. I do know that it was not part of Microsoft Word set. We had to download it after the fact. I forgot the name of it, but it is not part of their regular set for Word. That's all I know.
Right.
So anyway, distracted. I'm just curious.
That is a slab serif. So first of all, you have to know what it is, and then you would have to, maybe search it out if you didn't know. But you generally know.
It's amazing
because clients love to use certain types, and then you have to buy that type, and then you have that type, and then you're like, I love this type,
Amazing.
and so you start to use it, right? So anyway, so you would have the typography that you would use, and then you would have to have website typography that would be available for the web. You cannot, so there's all that, and that is stuck in a brand style guide, and that style guide is sent over, and it's got the what not to do's too. I'm not a huge fan of huge style guides.
Yeah.
You guys were talking about Truist style guide. No, I would say
not just Truist. Any company that's in the Fortune 500
is 4 pages, man.
No.
That's all
you don't need it. You start overdoing
it.
You probably have a problem with your standards if it goes too.
Somebody has to justify their worth by making long things that are convoluted. Every department has to justify their work. Truist has 600 marketing people. Somebody's got to justify it by having these long guides. Every Fortune 500 company, they've got all these departments. They have to make it. There's got to be the bureaucracy there as to why they're worth it.
Someone to sign off on everything.
Someone has to.
Oh yeah, Nick, and also it's like, when do you stop?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, when does this style guide stop? This is how it looks in an ad. And then you're just like, well, okay. Well, I just created an ad. Does that go in the style guide?
And I'll throw out my this is my classic example, and I can say the company because it was IBM, but we were in with all their identity people, and we actually had some of the work on our Indigo and Solar White Duplex and business cards. And so the classic was, well, why should we use this? It's more expensive. And I'm like, okay, well, everyone here on the table, throw out your business cards. Because we had people from all over the country. And they threw them all out. And, of course, they're all white cards with the IBM Blue printed on it. And let's say we had 8 cards, and there were about 4 different blues.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, here's
the problem.
Here's the paper.
Yeah.
You can use this duplex. This is we make it. We're the only one who makes it. Where was that printed? Where was that printed? Where was that printed? And they're like, done. We got, they switched the business cards.
Which is fantastic.
Because they had 60 printers around the country. And even though there was a PMS Blue,
they all printed different.
Never matched.
Yeah. And
then it was on us to make sure that if people ever did that at the paper mill, we had the blue, and we had obviously constraints and all that,
right.
But that it was correct.
Which is a perfect brand for that, for that conversation and that scenario, because they are great at that type of stuff, right? They've always been, and they have one of those icons of design that created it.
Oh yeah, simple.
Yeah,
because that was the old typewriter spread, right? The simple.
Yeah. And that was Paul. I believe it was Paul Rand, and he's like, look, they're like, okay, this is what we want. And Paul Rand was so well known. He said, well, this is what you're going to get. Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
And they're like, we'll take it.
Yeah, I believe so. So we got a couple minutes left. I think what I definitely want to do is when we come back, I want to talk about how AI comes into all of this, because it is one of the greatest fallacies that I've ever seen that is being portrayed, that it can do all this work and everything you're talking about. I can't imagine computer programs to even think with emotion yet, let alone do all this stuff. So I'm curious how you think it's going to affect the design industry. But why don't you just close us out? Tell us about, again, a little bit about the agency, where to find you. If anyone's out there that's looking for this stuff, make sure everybody knows how to find you and how to find your agency. Okay,
sure. So the agency is called Play. But we had to get a vanity URL because, let's face it, I cannot own play.com. I would love to.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy about the old .net. So I went goplaydesign.com. So that's where we're located. Right?
Yeah.
So that's where, and we are a medium-sized agency, and we handle design, branding, stuff like that. But we also do marketing and advertising. So we have several clients within the metro Atlanta area, but we also do national clients. And,
cool. About how many clients you have actively?
We actively have 40 or so clients.
Great.
But,
and how many staff do you have on before that?
We have 9 people that are heavily, are in Play. But we have a model that's kind of interesting. We have this independent contract model.
Yeah.
So they have 15 to 20 years experience each
of
what they do. Because you were talking about earlier, not here, but about how specialized everything is. It's very difficult because if you look at the pay, if I had to pay those people with that experience.
Well, talk about insurance, talk about 401ks, talk about all the benefits people are expecting, let alone the conversation of if you're going to work from home or come into the office.
And
My
I think
goodness.
all that's going to play into our conversation after the break with AI and what makes you different. So you're listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3. We'll be right back.
Every 3 minutes, a person in the U.S. is diagnosed with a blood cancer like leukemia, lymphoma, or myeloma, blood cancers that often require patients to endure difficult treatments that leave them feeling weak, cold, and isolated. Subaru of Gwinnett is here to help. Since 2016, Subaru has partnered with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, a cause that FAN has been proud to support for over 24 years. And in the month of June, through our Subaru Loves to Care initiative, we're continuing our partnership with LLS to give even more to patients and their families. Subaru, more than a car company. Visit SubaruofGwinnett.com to learn more.
Tonight in Arkansas, there's a mother tucking in her daughter and turning off the light. A business owner is burning the midnight oil. An at-home dinner date is plating up possibility. And it's all happening under one roof. How? The power of a conversation, like the one John from Integrity Solutions had with First Horizon Bank about his vision for a sustainable mixed-use building. Now it's not just words, it's life. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/John. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.
Now back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3 FM.
Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen. Nick Constantino and Trip Job here, and we're finishing up our conversation with Brett Player. Still love the name, by the way. And so one of the things we talk about a lot on the show is the marketing industry is very fractured right now, right? You see the how many CMOs are turning over of these big companies that are getting rid of CMOs, from Starbucks to UPS, and then you have a lot of agencies that keep popping up in these different segments. So digital agencies, analytics agencies, design agencies, media agencies, creative agencies. You add all these things, and I am at a point now where I think that really what's happening is marketing is trying to balance out the art and the science of this all. Okay, that they're really you go back to the 50s and 60s, it was all art. It was just elicit an emotional response. Now you speed through here, all these CMOs are leaving because all these 25-year-olds come in. Look at all the data, we can prove everything. And I think honestly that balance is where real success is. So we've seen all that change. So talk a little bit about what you've seen for that, and then we'll segue into what you think the future will hold for design and for agencies in general.
Sure. So with us, we were just talking a little earlier about how we have several, folks working with us that have these different skill sets.
Yep.
And right. So it's up to me, and we have, along with 20 years working in this industry, whatever they're doing, they're general strategists as well. So, we look at the clients and we figure out strategically how we're going to work, right? And then we put a game plan together, and then we segment it out, right? So there could be people that do the digital stuff that you're kind of talking about. And those folks, I have found, first of all, they have to be really nice, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to learn as much as, as what
it's
they're
very hard
doing.
to not come across as condescending when you're speaking about something that most people don't understand. And I know because I do it all the time. That's why I just know it.
It's like that SNL skit with the IT guy, that would just get all upset, but that's basically what digital marketers are now, right? They're just like down in their wormhole doing their stuff, and you're like, and quite honestly, a lot of times they love these wormholes and they go down it, but they're going the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So if you aren't, with them and talking with them on at least a weekly to biweekly basis, you can spend a lot of money and a lot of time, and they go the wrong way.
I agree with you.
I think that's important because I see so many that are so into the technology, but they don't know what you're really trying to accomplish and what the client may be trying to accomplish. And you have to pull them back and say, great, here's what we want to learn. Here's what we want to know. But
I think, Tripp, I completely agree with you. But I also think some of the onus should be back on the clients, where you should know enough to be dangerous. Because if they're going to pull the wool over your eyes if they believe that you don't know what you're talking about. So if you're owning a business, like everything, you should be immersed in every part of it. And there's so much information out there. I'm not saying you can learn to be a digital marketer overnight, but I'm saying I taught myself in 2 or 3 years enough to be pretty darn dangerous. You should be enough. But carry on. I completely agree with you.
I agree.
They have to be nice.
Traditionally, when we work with clients, these people are not ignorant about it. They generally have somebody that works within their marketing, within their digital area, and works kind of hand in glove with our digital marketing, right?
Yeah.
So they kind of are able to geek out, right? So together, they're able to just make it better and better. I'm there to level set, right? So I'm there to listen, and I just ask questions. I try to poke holes in things, or I say, hey, I love this new toy that we're seeing here, but honestly, who cares? I mean, this is like blocking and tackling stuff. And don't take the money away from the blocking and tackling, because that is
maybe
working.
Tripp talks about it all the time. Maybe throw 5% to an experimental budget to mess with something. Tripp talks about it all the time.
Yep. So yes, so we have that, and that's a type of person that's able to take calls from vendors that are like trying to sell software subscriptions that do different things, where you and I may not want to do that. But this guy, does it. That's
a tough job, man.
Yeah, he's totally,
there's a new one every day. There's a new one, and they're all promising you these outlandish things because everyone values ROI differently. So let me ask you this question, because that is fundamentally different than a lot of things we've heard. How do you keep those how do you keep those people happy? How do you keep those people and the freelancers aboard? Because it sounds like that's as hard of work. One, you have to have a pretty steady stream of work for them. I have to imagine is really important. But two, most agencies, I think they fail because they're too overstuffed and they try to take on too much work to compensate for it. So they hire and they go, oh my God, we got to pay all this people, and then they take on too many clients, so they can't give attention to it. So it seems like you've struck a pretty good model. What do you attribute that to?
Well, first of all, they're an independent contractor, so not only is the client their client, but I'm their client.
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome. They listen, when we have discussions, if something's going a little bit awry or, whatever, they'll listen to me because I'm the one writing the check, at the end of the day for them. So that helps, right? I think this is important because I've worked at a pretty good amount of agencies, and I've seen the money, right? So a lot of times a freelancer will come in and they'll be like, okay, so when am I getting paid? Well, the client hasn't paid. And they're like, well, you're the client. You're the one paying me, And I believe in that. So I pay immediately. So we pay immediately.
Dude, so that's blocking and tackling.
Right.
I hate to say it, but one of the reasons this company succeeds, our business office pays within 3 days without any questions asked, is it's paid. And I can't tell you how few agencies out there are because it feels what it feels like it's a lack of respect for time. Like when you're with a person who's always late, what do you say? That person disrespects everyone's around them time. Not paying somebody because of some stipulation is just a disrespectful way. So I think, but that's blocking and tackling. It should be.
It is, and it's sticky. It's loyalty.
Yeah.
They know that they're like
Real loyalty.
Yeah, they're like, I'm going to work with Play because I'm going to get paid like now.
Yeah,
and
you've got a rush opportunity, and guess who's they're going to say, yeah, I'll do it.
Exactly. And then I try opportunities to bring us together. Whatever that might be. And I'm also very transparent about the numbers at the end of the year. I break down everything about how much what the gross was, how much the net is, what we spend in advertising, what we gave back to the community.
That's great.
All this stuff is buy-in. And so. We're like a little family, At least I think so.
Yeah,
right?
Good for you, man.
And so that's really how we keep it going. So everybody will pick the phone up.
Good for you, bud. I mean, honestly, this has been a great conversation. We've covered so much. Let's close this out. Talk a little bit about the future of design, and talk a little bit of how AI fits into this, because you've seen it. There's web. They'll put an animation together for you based on your text. That's what you need. They'll make a logo for you based on the whimsy you go on over the day. Talk about how AI fits this, and why there will always be a space for your type of agency.
So I've never seen a brand or a logo that's been done, and let's not even talk about AI, but like farmed out to a bunch of people that you're paying $100 for.
Fiverr or something like that, yeah.
I mean, but even Fiverr, I think that you're going to pay $125 an hour, and then you're going to have
because you're buying hourly and you're giving direction.
I don't even know that model, but that whole that's kind of an AI model.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're just the quality is just not there. The thinking is not there. I think AI can be a really good tool, and I have used it a little bit, but I have talked with others that seem to know it a bit, and I will say that. For instance, I was talking about strategic briefs and creative briefs. Those things are kind of hard to figure out the best type of creative brief and strategy brief that you might have. AI could be a good tool for that.
Research.
Right?
It's fantastic for research.
And it'll also lay it out for you.
Right?
It'll lay it out for you. You can pick and choose, but it'll at least start the process of laying it out to start you in a direction.
Yeah.
Because those things are the hardest thing to get started.
Oh.
Like just how you're going to do it is the hardest part. So if it lays it out, you go, okay, I'm going to go with this, and you just work with it. So I agree with that.
Absolutely. I mean, I went on a quest. Literally, I went on a quest around America to go to these different agencies to find the best way to bring digital in to a more traditional agency and how that works. And then I ended up, and it's kind of, you guys are madmen. This is what I ended up. I ended up in Leo Burnett on an offshoot conversation talking about the strategic brief and how important that is, and how the creative brief is so important. And then, they worked with the writer, art director teams, and they came up with the ideas, and then the ideas were moved over into the digital realms and everything else where they really emphasize and push those out, And that, to me, was like an aha moment, right? But that is a lot of work to get to that point where AI could probably help you with that, right?
Yeah, but you're doing the investment up front, and
Right.
it pays off down the line.
And we talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
It's inputs and outputs. You have to give AI what people think is it's just going to magically do it. You have to give the inputs. It's a lot of work to make the inputs, but once it processes those outputs, that's what you're banking on. Most people just think it's going to magically do it with crappy inputs. You need good inputs to go into it.
You have to have good inputs.
Yeah.
But
sorry. No, Brett, this has been fantastic.
Sorry,
thanks for joining us. We're out of time. The website again to find you
is goplaydesign.com.
Awesome. Brett Player, thanks for joining us. You've been listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3. We'll be back next week.
Every 3 minutes, a person in the U.S. is diagnosed with a blood cancer like leukemia, lymphoma, or myeloma, blood cancers that often require patients to endure difficult treatments that leave them feeling weak, cold, and isolated. Subaru of Gwinnett is here to help. Since 2016, Subaru has partnered with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, a cause that FAN has been proud to support for over 24 years. And in the month of June, through our Subaru Loves to Care initiative, we're continuing our partnership with LLS to give even more to patients and their families. Subaru, more than a car company. Visit SubaruofGwinnett.com to learn more.
Tonight in Arkansas, there's a mother tucking in her daughter and turning off the light. A business owner is burning the midnight oil. An at-home dinner date is plating up possibility. And it's all happening under one roof. How? The power of a conversation, like the one John from Integrity Solutions had with First Horizon Bank about his vision for a sustainable mixed-use building. Now it's not just words, it's life. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/John. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.
This is Jonathan Geller at D. Geller & Son Jewelers, where we're holding our most exciting event of the summer this weekend. It's our Gnome Carver Trunk Show. Gnome Carver has been renowned and awarded for some of the best new engagement ring and wedding band designs in the world. And this weekend at D. Geller & Son, not only can you see Gnome's entire collection in one place, you can meet and shop with the designer himself. To make it better, we're offering special 24-month 0 APR financing all weekend, June 21st through 23rd, in all 3 D. Geller & Son showrooms, Atlanta, Kennesaw, and Sandy Springs. Learn more and make your appointment at dgeller.com.